I'm Joelle, second from right in the photo that you see there, and Karen is second from left. And on the left is our program associate working in DC, Elizabeth, and on the far right is our program associate working in Baltimore, Chiquita. And all of us are honored to be working with all of you. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to Fred, Rabbi Fred Sherlinder-Dobb, the vice chair of our board, who's going to open tonight's gathering with a reflection.
Thank you, Joelle, and it's an honor to be on this call with a bunch of people that I know and respect and have worked closely with. And shalom, all you green sheep out there. I love the graphic that's on the bottom right of your screen, and I know that you will enjoy the rest of the visuals too, those of you for whom it's working. Some of them will be text and photos of our own synagogue. I don't yet have photos to show of our house because the solar panels go up next month, but we are part of over 70 homes that are now going solar just in Ward 3 of Northwest DC, and that is the latest incarnation of what our own panelist, Anya Schoolman, helped to get going. And I might plant the seed that she should share the remarkable story of how she and her family first got into solar advocacy and door-to-door organizing. It has something to do with our synagogue Adat Shalom, but it's also a reminder of the power of young people in this effort. Amazing work that Anya and her family and everyone on this call has done. I was asked to give a reflection, which is something between a prayer and a teaching. And what came to mind was to reflect on reflection. Reflection as a matter of science and as a matter of spirit. The atmospheric science is clear and the consensus is robust. The Earth has had millions of years of a stable orbit around the sun in kind of a Goldilocks position, right? Not too cold, not too hot, not too far, not too close. And it's all explainable by the laws of physics, but it's no less, quote, miraculous for it. And Earth has had, for those millions of years, a mostly stable atmosphere, which is because of the right ratio of reflection and absorption. Reflections of solar energy from cloud and water and land, and absorption of just the right amount of solar radiation. Again, Goldilocks. Too much reflection and we would freeze. Too little and we would swelter. One key component of that mix, of course, was relatively constant atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide. And we have ice core samples that are definitive going back 800,000 years, showing that at the height of the last ice age, when the greater Washington region that's on this call was under very thick ice, the atmospheric concentration was 180 parts per million. And it had risen by 100 to 280 parts per million at the dawn of modernity in the 19th century. It has risen by more than that 800,000-year interval in the last 150 years. It's now over 400 and rising, almost overnight in geological time, thanks to us. We have shifted the balance. We have, if you will, too little reflection, too much absorption. Reflection matters. Theologically speaking, humans in the Abrahamic faith are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. There's a beautiful text in the Talmud in Sanhedrin that's also almost verbatim in one of the authoritative hadith in the Islamic tradition that says that each of us is created in the divine image so that and descended from one common ancestor, created in that image, so that no one can say my ancestry is better than yours. We're very much in it together. And in a sense, we are holograms. Each of us is a reflection of the divine. But even though only humans are created in the image of God, all of the earth is filled with God's glory. That's Isaiah, Meloch ol haaretz kavodo. And as Psalms remind us, the rivers clap hands, the sea roars, the mountains rush. The land and nature, the world around us, has agency. It has standing. It too, all of creation, reflects God's glory. What we need to do now is to reflect on how we reflect, to reflect on what it means to be created in the image of God, and therefore with enlightened stewardship of the rest of creation, to reflect on how much reflection or absorption is happening in the global system as a result of what our one species has done to the global climate. As people of faith, we focus on climate for three overarching reasons: for justice, particularly for the poor who did the least to contribute to global climate change but are the first and hardest hit; for creation itself, we already know that climate change is driving a wave of extinction like we haven't seen in 70 million years; and intergenerational sustainability. If for no other reason, let us reflect on the legacy that we leave those who come after us. So the postscript to this is there's nothing like the glare off a solar panel. A solar panel is a brilliant example of reflection and absorption because it's shining and there's a lot that gets reflected, but what is absorbed is the most sustainable possible. Let all of the absorption that is happening either go into leaves at the root of an entire food chain and web of life, because that, of course, is a reflection of God's glory. And if not, let it fall on photovoltaic cells, and then the absorption will itself be reflection. Thank you all for your involvement, and go Green Sheep.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Fred. So as we reflect on reflecting, we're going to move on to our first speaker. So Shahar Colt is working for Interfaith Power Light this summer. She's a rabbinical student in Boston during the year. And this is the third summer in a row that she has focused for Interfaith Power Light entirely on listening to and learning from the congregations in our region that have gone solar or are working to go solar. And I think it's safe to say she's the only person who has talked to every congregation that has gone solar in this region and most of those that are working on it. And so she brings a kind of unique level of insight about the state of our efforts. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shahar to tell us what all that listening has led to.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me, Joelle?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be talking about this work and to be doing it again for a third summer. I keep record of all the congregations that I speak to and that I've spoken to since 2012, and I just wanted to share that we've consulted with over 100 congregations, and there are 14 in the region that have gone solar, some of which we went solar, we found out afterwards, so that basically there are congregations working on this that we don't know about potentially. But right now, in the past year, we think there's 22 congregations that are actively pursuing solar, that are engaged in doing research or putting out proposals to solar companies. There are 27 congregations that are at the beginning of that research who contacted us for initial consultations or to talk about our materials. So it's really exciting that there does feel like a lot of interest in this. So that you can see the slide of the congregations that have completed this process. Before I go further, the first thing I want to talk about is some basics about financing solar panels for congregations and clear up some misconceptions. So I think, there we go. So the first thing is that congregations, for the most part, there is one exception, they do not own their solar panels. They are not buying their solar panels because as nonprofits, the congregations cannot take advantage of tax-based incentives. So a system costs significantly more for a congregation to buy than for a company to buy. so as a result, the way that it works out is that there's an arrangement called a power purchase agreement where a third-party financer buys and owns the panels, and the congregation and that third party has an agreement with the congregation who pays for the electricity from that company, but the savings that the financer gets from owning the company are passed on to the congregation that's buying the electricity. And the PPA agreements are usually for a fixed amount of time. And you might hear some people talk about this as a lease agreement. If it's a solar lease, sometimes there's some amount of payment up front to the company that's buying the electricity in advance so that their monthly payments are lower or non-existent. But still, the congregation itself does not own the panels, at least to begin with. Often at the end of the PPA agreement, or there's a clause in the agreement that the congregation can purchase the panels after a number of years once the company has compensated their losses for buying the company and made the money that they're going to make. And so that might differ from in different contexts. But the basic bottom line thing that it's really important for our congregations who are just beginning this to know is that you're not looking to own the panels. So I think we can go to the next slide. The next thing that I want to stress is that when we work with congregations, one of the things we've noticed is that part of the process of going solar involves technical skills of knowing your electric bills and looking at the finances very carefully, or knowing about the solar panels or energy saving techniques. But a huge amount of the effort that is involved in congregational solar is the interpersonal human work that happens at the congregational level. And what I mean by that is if you are a homeowner thinking about solar panel for your house, you might have to consult with, for example, your spouse, or maybe you don't have to consult with anyone. You can just decide if this is a good thing for your house. But in a congregation, there's a decision-making process that usually involves a lot of people and levels of authority and getting people to agree that this is a good idea, and people have a lot of feelings about their building and where the congregation should be putting their energy. And the solar projects that are successful have to navigate building confidence. The people who are initiating the project often have to build confidence that they understand what they're doing and that they can convey the information about why this project is really worthwhile to other people in their congregation. And the other part is that it is being strategic to figure out how you can organize getting the information and the buy-in of the right people in the right order, at the right time to get behind the project. So, for example, if you get really excited about solar and then you immediately contact solar companies, but you haven't checked with, the building committee about the state of the roof and whether the roof needs repair, you might get caught up because you have to go back and get various pieces of information about the actual congregational building, or you need to get the approval from the board, or so you have to think about whose buy-in you need. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. What does it look like to be strategic about getting this process, doing the interpersonal side of this process, because congregations are about the people in them. So if you look at this graphic, this was my first experience of trying to draw on the computer and create a little diagram of what might be some of the different groups involved in your congregation. And if you're a small congregation, you might not have all of these different groups, but you might have someone who functions in these ways. So I listed the biggest square is the congregation as a whole. And within that, you're going to have clergy, maybe a board of trustees, various committees like a green team or a ritual committee, a budget committee. And then I have the preschool families as sort of an example of groups that use your congregational space that may or may not be, the people in them may or may not be directly affiliated with the congregation. And then on the outside, I have a couple of resources, places that might be relevant to the project, like Interfaith Power and Light, and perhaps other denominational resources. So as I was thinking about these different groups of people in your congregation, I was thinking, who has the power to do what, and how are they going to interface with your project? How are they relevant to getting this project to completion? So to begin with, the religious leader inspires the congregation and guides us towards what is right. And from congregation to congregation, it depends how much power they have in making something happen at the congregation. So I know of one church where once the pastor was behind the project, that project was going to happen. And I know many other congregations that the decision-making process has to go much more through the board of trustees or other groups of people. But think about, what kind of power your clergy has and what venues do they have to work in. How would it help the project to have them preach about it or teach about it, or just generally be supportive, and how can you work with them to inform them about the process? Similarly, for the board of trustees, what's their job? They usually approve of the budget. So what is the structure? How often do they meet? Who's on it, and how do they do decision making, so that when you bring your proposal to the board, if that's a part of the process, which it often is, how can you know already who's in the room and speak to the kinds of interests, the kinds of questions that they're most likely to have, so that you can have a efficient conversation with them. In terms of the green team, that's a really important group. You want to make sure that they're often the people responsible for educating the congregation about environmental issues, and you want to make sure that people on your team know and support this project. They often are people who are organizing opportunities for congregants to take action on the environment, both in the congregation, like greening your building in other ways, or in the broader world by, doing recycling projects and thinking about your environmental impact in other ways, or advocacy. So how can you integrate this and make it like more of a congregational project to learn about solar and to support it and get people excited about the prospect of having solar panels on the building? Who are the other lay people? There might be people who are in your congregation who are not part of the green team but have certain expertise that you could tap on. Maybe they're energy experts in some other aspect of their life, and they might be excited to help see this project through. Or maybe they're, roofers or engineers who, might be helpful to the board to say, yeah, we're pretty confident this is not going to, affect our roof, or yeah, we should look into, whatever the question is. There are different. It's good to look around and see who else is available to pull into the project and what skills they have. In terms of what I put as the preschool, thinking about who uses the building, and similarly to the lay people in general, like what's their investment in the building, how can you get them excited about the project, and what kind of resources might they have to offer if there are people who have skills there. And the more people that you can get excited about the project and get on board with it, the more likely it is to happen. In terms of resources outside of your congregation, sometimes if you're part of a denomination, there might be resources about such as building funds or like loan funds that specifically help congregational building projects. And it's good to look around and see, have other congregations in your denomination gone solar, and did they get support in any other ways, or just generally connect over the fact that you're trying to do this together. And I noticed that in addition to the resources that we have about our region, because of the recent solar pledge that IPL nationally is doing. There's a lot of resources about online that I can share you. I think I just found them today, so I didn't include them in the resources, but I can share them about across the country, different solar projects that different faith groups are doing. That's, it's important to think about all these levels at the beginning and try and think about a plan of what makes sense to do first. And I just want to name a couple of the resources that IPL has and when in the process is the most useful to look at them. To begin with, we have a solar booklet that you saw the cover of at the beginning, and that has in it an introduction to the solar financing options, as well as the stories of the congregations that have gone solar. And I think a lot of the most common questions are answered in that booklet, so I would actually recommend reading it pretty carefully. And then I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about any questions that come up from reading it, but I think it gives a really good orientation to this process. And so that's a good place for Green Team leaders or clergy or anyone who's interested to start off learning about this process. When you're thinking about putting out a proposal, when you feel like you have enough support to start looking at solar companies and putting out a proposal, we keep a list of companies that are interested in working with congregations, and we can share that with you, and we update that on a semi-regular basis because there are changes in the companies and who the contact person is. So that's a great place to start for when you're actually putting out the proposal. And I should have said, I skipped one important thing, is that we have a listserv that has the people on the listserv are people who have been involved in congregational projects that have been completed, or people who are in the process of working on the solar projects. And it's a great way you can send an email and say, well, this is the question we have, we're working on, does anyone have a background with this? And get support from other congregations directly. And the listserv hasn't been so active recently, but I'm hoping this summer that as we move forward on different projects while I'm working here again, to see a little bit more activity there, because I think it's really great for people from different congregations to help each other out. So those are the main resources that we have, and Karen and Joelle, who are on staff at IPL, also know a great deal about this, so I know that we're generally very excited to answer any questions. So I think that sums it up from my end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shahar. So one of the things that really makes an impression on me in hearing Shahar talk is that she spent the bulk of the time talking about the human aspect of getting these projects to happen, really thinking about the diplomacy rather than the technology. And I think that's very much been our learning as well in interacting with congregations working on these projects, that the technology works and the financing is available, but you need to be prepared to do the real work of making change happen in your very human institution. Down to meeting with every member of the Board of Trustees before an important meeting so that you know where all of them stand on your project before an important decision is made. And when we think for ourselves, why have there been 14 congregations ever so far that have successfully put up solar panels and not hundreds more? It's the difficulty of that human piece of this that's been the greatest obstacle rather than technical or financial obstacles. So I really appreciate the invitation for all of us to focus on the human aspects of this challenge. And I also want to just raise up, again, Shahar described our solar booklet, which is a free download on our website. The link is in the notes handout that was attached to the email that Karen sent out this afternoon. And that booklet tells the stories of all 14 congregations so far that have put up solar panels successfully. And I think it's a really wonderful place to start if you're thinking about solar for your congregation, to just really hear the stories of the congregations that have been through it and and what their learning was, what their advice to future congregations would be, what they wish they'd known when they started, that they learned along the way. And to give us a sense of one of those stories tonight, we have Bill Halpern from Adat Shalom Reconstructionist Congregation, which was, I think, the fourth congregation in our region that we know of to successfully install solar panels and among the largest to date when they did it. So I'm going to hand it over to Bill. Oh. Bill, are you on the line? You might need to unmute. Uh-oh. Bill, do we have you?
You are now unmuted.
We may need, can you unmute everybody? Bill, do we have you on the line?
Yes, somehow I got lost, but I just dialed back in.
Okay. Okay, well.
I'm not quite sure what happened, but I just lost the connection, but I'm back now.
Okay, well.
Okay.
You are now muted.
Okay. Well, my story is follows very much the same lines that Shahar described in general terms, and I'm going to talk about it in the way it specifically played out with Adat Shalom. First of all, a little quick background. We're a congregation of about 500 families. We sit on a 5-acre property in Bethesda that adjoins Congressional Golf Course, so we're kind of displaced this week by the golf tournament. Nobody's at the synagogue. And the building is now about 14. I stepped up as board president in 2008, and at that time, when I stepped up, if you recall, 2008 was the year that we kind of entered the Great Recession. So we were facing some serious financial concerns and questions about the congregation, membership levels, from a community that had been growing fairly rapidly for the previous 5 or 6 years. We entered a period of flat growth, concerns about financial liability, and so on. We were in good financial shape, but there were a lot of people worried about the future. I was approached by a couple of people in the congregation who were sort of the passionate advocates of this. Anya was one, and a member, Sheila Blum, was another. And between the two of them, they came to me with a document that talked about the value of solar and identified a couple of the vendors in the area, and they were the ones who kind of launched the process. And that's one of the things that from what I've seen, and I've spoken to a couple of congregations, you need somebody who is passionate about this to get the process going. And in this particular case, it was Anya and Sheila. And they approached me, and recognizing, again, this human element, we quickly got a couple of other people involved in the congregation. One, it was the folks who were in charge of our land and building committee, because they're the ones who were going to be the people who spoke the truth about the state of the roof and building repairs and so on. And the other was our finance budget committee, because the concern there was going into it, we didn't know what our outlays would be. We didn't know how it would impact financially. So we fairly quickly brought those two groups into the discussion. And the third one, and it wasn't on the chart that you saw before, is we brought our executive director into the discussion, because at least in our synagogue, the executive director is the person who is in charge of sort of the day-to-day bill paying, the person who watches the electric rate, negotiates with the landscape people, and we had someone who had been there a long time and who had a lot of voice on sort of day-to-day financial matters. So we had those three groups that we pulled together, and we recognized the value of what we wanted to do. I didn't take very much convincing, and I became kind of the champion of it at the board level. And what we did is between Anya and Sheila and myself, we kind of reworked the paper into a more, the paper they had presented to me, to a more broad scope paper that talked about our specific congregation, our configuration, things of that nature. And we presented it to the board. And we did it as an educational piece. We did not ask for approval in stage one. We wanted to bring everybody up to speed, because one of the things you have to recognize is in a congregation you're going to have people with different levels of knowledge about solar. There were people who were confused between solar power and solar heating, and until we realized that, they had questions about what happens if a pipe breaks and the water pours down from the roof. And so, you think that's kind of a little bit silly, but until you actually go through and find out what people know about this and what they think about it, you'd be surprised at that. So there was a consciousness-raising effort. And what we did is we presented the paper, and then we asked every member of the board if they had any questions to send them to us, Sheila, Anya, and myself. And then we prepared kind of a Q&A document that answered all of their questions, and then we went back to the board, and I think there may have been a couple of months in between the two, and asked them for approval of the project. Now, the two issues that we wrestled with initially were, one, this question of the financing and the PPA. We all recognized we needed a PPA, but there was a lot of discussion as to who would be on the other side of the PPA. Would it be a totally independent third-party financing firm, or there had been some cases where the members of the congregation were actually investors in the PPA. So in other words, there would be an LLC formed, owned by members of the congregation, who would be the owners of the solar panels. They would then sell the electricity to the congregation under the PPA. There was I think it was an Episcopal church out in San Francisco area that had gone that route, and it had kind of appeal to it, in that it felt like it was keeping all the benefits within our community. We fairly quickly got to the point where we realized that was a very complex way of doing it, and concerns about some members investing, some members not investing, and there would be distinctions among our members based on financial ability. And so in the end, we kind of abandoned that, and we went with the PPA with a company that's a venture capital firm out of Connecticut that specializes in these kind of arrangements. So with the financing issue out of the way, the next issue that concerned us is one that has, I think, tripped up a number of congregations, and that is the nature of the roof. Our building was, as I said, when we started working on this, at that point it was about 10 years old. However, the condition of the roof in the area, the prime area where we wanted to put the panels, was not that good. It had deteriorated. The initial construction work was not that great, and it had deteriorated further than it should have, given the amount of time. So we were going I think about $40,000 or $50,000 to replace the roof, and that represented a concern for a lot of people. But we basically kind of got people on board in terms of saying that this is something that we were going to have to do in the next 2 or 3 years. We're advancing the purchase, advancing the replacement, and that once we did that, then the roof would have a greater life expectancy because the panels would provide some protection against the elements. So with those two issues out of the way, the financing and the roof, it went pretty smoothly after that. Now, one of the things that we did after we got board approval is I realized that we were going to be shifting into a different phase where passion about solar was really kind of secondary to contract negotiations, legal negotiations, and so on. So what we did, and this is kind of going back to the chart that Shahar had where she said 20% technical skills, 80% interpersonal. I would cast the percentages a little different because I would say there's a good chunk of work related to actually negotiating a contract, putting out RFPs, evaluating RFPs, negotiating a contract, supervising construction, and all of that. So what we did is we formed a task force once the board approved it, and Sheila Blum was on the task force, but we recruited some members who had contracting skills, who had negotiating skills. One of the members of our congregation worked for a law firm, and he had his law firm provide pro bono legal work on this. You know, we live in an area where our congregations have very rich in human resources, and you really should be very careful and really search through your members and find those members who can contribute either directly or through their firms into this. So we were able to get a first-class negotiator, first-class legal talent, first-class construction oversight, all from among us as members of our congregation, and all without any cost to us. Even with all that great talent, we still had some problems. We wanted to get the roof replaced before we started, and by the time we got all the contract and so on work done, it was somewhere around November, and in a normal Washington November, we would have been able to replace the roof, but as it turned out, we had a very cold fall, so the roof didn't get replaced until March. So that pushed us back 5 or 6 months. Then, in kind of a couple of months into this, the construction company we had hired, they had a solar installer specialist, and the solar installer specialist walked off the job kind of a couple of weeks into it. So they were then thrown for a little bit of a loop. So these are the kinds of problems that you almost always run up against, and that's why you need the people to carry this through who have the experience and skills to deal with these kind of missteps, hiccups, and things of that nature. But it did finally get done. It has met all expectations. Oh, I should mention one other thing. Because we were doing this at a time of great financial uncertainty, 2008, 9, 10, one of the conditions the board placed upon me and the negotiators was that the cost of electricity under the PPA could not exceed what we were then paying, I guess it was Pepco at that particular time. So that even though we all recognized the great value in healing the earth benefits of going solar, the financial concerns in a difficult financial environment sort of, I wouldn't say trumped the other thought, but it kind of balanced out the ethical considerations, or was in tandem with them. But as it turned out, we were able to negotiate a deal that actually gave us a slight discount. It's not a great deal. At the end of the year, it may be $1,000 or $1,500, and that's not a lot of money. But as long as it's on the positive side of the ledger, everybody's very happy with it. That's about it. I'll add one little short postscript to this. We had wanted to make this a teaching issue as well. And so what we did is we convinced the installer to give us a free monitor which we had mounted in our lobby, and we developed a slide presentation which includes some of the picture you see in front of you, a few others of Rabbi Fred climbing on the roof, and it was going to display in real time the amount of energy that we were getting from the solar, how many cars it offset, all the good information, and all of that was all set except the solar, the owners of the panels, this venture capital outfit, refused to give us a live data feed. They insisted upon getting a fee for providing us the data. It was essentially their data because they own the panel. So in the end, the teaching moment went away, and the monitor is sitting there blankly staring at people as they walk through our lobby. That's about it. It's about 14 minutes. I'll stick around for any questions.
Thank you so much, Bill. So we're actually going to have our questions at the end of our three presenters. Before I forget, I wanted to just mention that that Interfaith Power and Light is in touch with a couple of the lawyers that agreed to do pro bono assistance to some of the first 14 congregations, and in at least in one case, we've been able to connect new congregational solar projects with lawyers that are willing to do pro bono work for them as well. So don't hesitate to contact us if you can't find a lawyer in your congregation who's willing to help out with that. We may be able to help you out. And so we're going to, for this next piece of our webinar, we're actually going to switch gears. We've been talking about what congregations can do to make it possible to put solar panels on the roof of their own facilities. But there's another exciting program that has been getting underway in our region that enables groups of homeowners who either have a neighborhood in common or an institution in common to come together and bid as a group to have their homes all purchase solar panels for their homes at the same time. And we think that this is of great interest to congregational communities because it would be a really exciting project for a lot of congregations to have their members who own their homes work together to go solar as a group. Anya's going to talk a little bit about the success that the Community Power Network has already had in doing this kind of group residential solar purchase in the region already. And then there are kind of two potential ways to move this forward. We are actually going to do this. Interfaith Power and Light is partnered with the Community Power Network to do two group purchases for sort of the faith community, broadly speaking, this summer. One will be in Northern Virginia and based out of 3 hub congregations, Temple Road Adat Shalom, Adams Center, the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. But any homeowner in Northern Virginia that's part of our network is going to be able to participate. And we'll also be doing a group purchase for faith communities in Baltimore. So those are actual group purchases that will be taking place this summer. But we also think this is a model that many congregations could try themselves to do a group purchase partnered with the Community Power Network where the organizing institution is the congregation itself. So both if you're eligible for this practical opportunity coming up this summer, but also if this is an idea that might be a good fit for your community, I'm really excited to have a little time to think about residential solar in our communities with Anya.
Thanks, Joelle, and thanks, Fred and Bill, also for your words. So I guess just keying off of what Fred said, I just wanted to give people a little background about me and how I got into this. It was actually through my son, Walter, when he was 12 and getting ready to figure out what his social action project would be to prepare for his bar mitzvah. And he had come home from seeing the movie Inconvenient Truth and said, we should go solar. And so we looked into it at the time. This was 2006 2007, late 2006, early 2007, and got overwhelmed. And it's something that some of you might relate to if you've sort of looked into this issue. We were overwhelmed by the technology, the rules, the IRS codes, the incentives, all sorts of different things. And at the time, I said to my son Walter and his best friend Diego, who was involved in the plot, we should do the whole neighborhood, because if we could do the whole neighborhood, at least it would be worth all that work to figure it out. And they invented the idea of the Mount Pleasant Solar Co-op. And they created flyers and went door to door and asked people, would you like to go solar? Would you go solar if it costs more than you pay now, less, or the same? And asked a bunch of other questions about how much energy they use. And 2 weeks later, we had 50 households that signed up and no idea what we were going to do. And that became my entryway as a family into sort of a crash course about solar. And I don't have time to tell the whole story here, but in 2009, we took 45 houses solar as a group. And since then, even in the past year, past 2 years, first of all, I want to say I helped 6 of those churches on that list go solar. The co-ops in D.C. kept growing and growing and became an organization called D.C. Sun, which some of you may have heard of. And we now have Virginia Sun and Maryland Sun, which are technically projects of Community Power Network. We've done neighborhood bulk purchases in 16th Street Heights, Mount Pleasant, Petworth, Capitol Hill, Ward 5, Ward 3. We did one with the World Wildlife Fund and their staff and families, which was Virginia, D.C., and Maryland. And we are just finished one with the University of Maryland with their Office of Sustainability. And we just finished one with Blacksburg, Virginia. Right now we have underway groups in Brooklyn, Hyattsville, and Fayetteville, and Monroe County, West Virginia. And for the sort of summer-fall docket, we have groups planned in Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Rockville, Bowie, Baltimore, as Joelle mentioned, Northern Virginia, as Joelle mentioned, also Arlington, Harrisonburg, Virginia, and Floyd, Virginia. Can you go to the next slide? Did you guys make that slide? I'm not going to talk for too long because I think it's better if we leave people with time to ask questions. We have now, as Bill mentioned, we started out with passion, and now I think we've gotten to the point of deep technical expertise. We support institutions to go solar, and we support communities to go solar. What we do is help you through that process, and we start the process when someone invites us or asks us to help them. The co-op process is really a way to get a better deal for your solar because you have one valuable expertise. You have people that know the market, they know the prices, they know the technology. You get a major discount on going solar as a group because we are basically eliminating what they call customer acquisition costs. But the cost of finding the customers for solar installers in the residential realm is about 30%. So that savings is passed on to the homeowner. We've been getting, for the groups we've been doing this year, about 25 to 35% off what it would cost to do it on your own. But you also get the comfort and support of a group in that you have a group of neighbors, a group of peers, a group of people, fellow congregants or co-workers going through the process at the same time so that when questions come up or issues come up, you have the ability to address them and you have the power to address them as a group. And sometimes that's what it takes, especially if there's regulatory hiccups or hiccups with the utility or things like that. So this graphic on the screen, for those of you who can see it, kind of shows what the process is like. But I think that My guess is, and Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it might be better, instead of for me going into depth of the process, for us to open up to questions, and we can talk about all the speakers can answer questions.
Sure. In terms of the process, we'll have, for the specific groups that we're organizing this summer, we'll have info sessions at 2 different congregations towards the middle and then the end of July in Northern Virginia, and also 2 info sessions towards the middle and then end of July in Baltimore, and follow mostly the process that you see here. But yeah,
I would just add, Joelle, when we do those info sessions, we spend an hour just explaining everything about solar, the cost, the economics, the technology, the process, and then we spend about an hour answering questions. And that's the beginning. That's the entry level. So that's why I'm thinking,
Great. So I think that's, I second Anya's motion that we move to questions, and would invite anyone who, I'm going to start by passing along a question we got that I think Anya will enjoy responding to. So Lynn Chambers wanted to know, people ask her questions about, will hail damage the solar panels, and other questions that just reflect people's unfamiliarity with solar technology. And I just wanted to hear your response to someone who's in a congregation and is getting a lot of questions about, will they start fires and that kind of question.
Sure. So the short answer is no. Hail will not damage. They're rated up to, I think it's like an inch-size golf ball hail. We've been getting reports lately about a lot of panels surviving hurricanes. These things are really, in terms of the technology of solar, it's one of the easiest things you'll do on your congregation or on your home. There's no moving parts. The only challenge is how are you going to attach it to your roof. But the equipment itself is very, very safe, has no moving parts, does not start fires, and is not fragile at all. So.
If I could, Joelle, let me quickly add, one of the questions along those lines that we got from the board and from a number of members is, it's kind of like, are we investing in something where technology is changing so rapidly that in a year or two they'll have great new panels that are double the efficiency and so on and so forth. And I think one of the points that we made is that this is pretty mature, stable technology. We didn't see very much of it because it was an economic issue. There have been technical improvements, but that the basic technology has been around for a number of decades. And it was not an issue of just waiting for the latest and greatest solar panel. Now's as good a time as any.
Great. Another question that we got, but I have to explain it a little bit for everyone else. So a question is about SRECs, solar renewable energy credits. So right now, when whoever owns solar panels can, in the DC and Maryland market, sell something called solar renewable energy credits, SRECs, into this compliance market. So there are laws requiring the DC and Maryland utilities to purchase solar renewable energy credits from solar panels in their area, and this is a way of incentivizing solar because anyone who owns solar panels can sell those SRECs as they generate power from the panels. But our question is, does that detract? With homeowners, they can sell their SRECs directly through a broker, and then with congregations, usually the panels are owned by a third party, and it's that third party that can profit by selling the SRECs because they own the panels. And so our question is about credit, and sort of, that we all are familiar with the idea of purchasing wind renewable energy credits on our energy bills and saying, therefore, that our home is wind-powered, or like My Organic Market says that their stores are wind-powered because they're purchasing RECs. So if you're in a position where you're generating RECs and you're selling them to someone else, is there some way in which your congregation can no longer feel like you get credit for being for that solar if you are selling these SRECs at a profit? And I'm curious to hear folks' responses, and I'll share my own thoughts also.
Do you want me to give a shot at that one, Joel?
Go for it.
So the short answer is, if you sell the SRECs, which if you're a congregation and you have power purchase agreement, you almost by definition are selling the SRECs. The SRECs are going to the person who owns the panels. And at your home, most people sell their SRECs because it's the engine, and it is the primary incentive that drives the market. And that's what it's designed to do. And if you want to say, I have a net zero home or I have a 100% green home, you can't do that if you have the SREC. You do, in fact, sell the bragging rights to the energy. However, you can still say, I have a solar-powered building, or 30% of my energy comes from solar power, and you could also say that we've made a major contribution towards greening the grid and showing that a greener, more renewable grid is possible. So there is a gradation, but you do, in fact, when you sell your SRECs, you, for example, cannot say that you're a net zero home.
Yeah, I very much share that sense when I've been asked this question, Anya, that people should. I don't think there's any reason to get hung up on the sort of ethics of selling SRECs. I think anything that helps make the project financially viable for either the PPA provider or for the homeowner is great, and that we can still be proud of putting more solar onto the grid, even if we, in some sense, sell the bragging rights by letting the SRECs be sold for profit.
Just, Joelle, can I just add to that? In addition to feeling like you're part of adding more clean energy to the grid, being part of a congregation and doing this inspires all the congregants to learn about solar, and to just everybody who walks in the building on some level is touched by this. It has affects many more people in ways besides directly the energy, the green, and I would say it has an environmental educational effect on beyond the immediate effect of how much clean energy is on the grid, which is a different thing to measure, but important also.
Yeah, that's a great point. So many congregations find this so inspiring. At St. Albans Episcopal Parish, one of the first in our region, they call the solar panels their new stained glass windows, really feeling like those solar panels proclaim their story to the world and have been really transformative in their community. So I completely affirm that there's a real inspirational power to these projects that transcends just what you're doing on the building itself. So we're getting a number of questions, both about congregational facility solar and about home solar. Let's take a couple more about the congregational facilities and then switch to talking about the residential co-op to keep things organized. So we have a question about what percentage of a congregation's energy use can be covered by solar panels, and if there's an opportunity to sell excess onto the grid. And I know the answer to that is slightly different in D.C. and in Maryland and in Virginia.
You want me to take that one?
Sure.
So the percent of your energy that you can produce on your roof depends on two things. It depends on the size of your roof. In other words, how much solar can you fit up there? And it depends on how much energy you use. So if you use very little energy and say you have a very, very big roof, you could cover all of your energy, all of your use. Very few buildings do. Every different building is different. And when you get a a proposal from a solar company, one of the things they do is ask you for your bill. They look at your average annual usage, and they will give you a projection of how much of your energy will be covered by the solar. And usually those projections are very, very accurate. There was a secondary part of that question, which I'm totally spaced now. Can you sell back to the grid? So the way net metering is designed, so when you have solar on your roof, you're net metering, which means you're essentially reducing your bill by the amount you produce. In D.C. and Maryland and Virginia, you do not sell your energy back to the grid. You can carry it excess from month to month, and if you have a large excess in Maryland at the end of the year, which is actually extremely rare, you get us an actual check from the utility, but you're not really selling energy to the grid. You're just getting refunded at the wholesale price for the retail energy you produce, so it's not a very good deal. In D.C., you just carry over a credit indefinitely. And Virginia's is a little bit similar to Maryland. I can't remember the exact details, but you get reimbursed, but it's at a very low rate. So nobody designs solar systems to make money off the grid in our markets. What they do is design solar to maximize, to offset their own use. That's the objective.
Joel, this is Bill Renner. Can I comment on this?
Sure.
Maryland regulations.
Bill, tell everyone who you are.
Yeah, I'm Bill Renner. I'm the Property Operations Chair of United Church of Christ of Seneca Valley in Germantown, and we're in the midst of a very large-scale solar project that will provide twice the annual electricity our church uses. And the regulations in Maryland have changed where now the utility will, in our case PEPCO, has to buy the excess power at the rate, the actual generating rate that we're paying for power. So it's no longer the wholesale rate. And we're actually getting our power through the community power program by groundswell currently. So we'll be selling, or PEPCO will be reimbursing us for our excess power at the rate we're buying power from PEPCO or from through the groundswell program. This was a change last year.
And I believe one difference. I know that in Maryland you can, in theory, put up to 200% of your own energy use on your roof in solar panels. But I believe in D.C. the limit is closer to 100%, and probably in Virginia as well. Anya, I don't know if you can correct me on that.
That's right for D.C.
Yeah. So that's actually a question where the answer about how much more solar could you put up than your congregation even could use is a different answer in Maryland than in D.C. or in Virginia. I think we will probably switch gears now. Oh yes, we have one more question about congregations. People were curious about anyone who had experience with parking lot structures that are solar generating in congregations or elsewhere.
I don't think that the congregations that we've talked to, I haven't heard of any of that are parking lot. There's ground-mounted solar, but I don't know about specifically parking lots. If there's any congregations in Maryland, the Maryland Energy Administration has been planning, and I don't know if they've done it yet, to put out an incentive specifically for parking lot solar. So if people do have parking lots and they're in Maryland, it's something to look into. In general, ground-mounted solar adds about a third to the cost of your installation in our market. I expect those prices to go down because when you go to other markets that have more ground mount or parking lot solar, it's not such a big difference. So one of the things is we don't have a lot of companies in our market that are experienced with that.
Great. So I'm going to, thanks for everyone asking fantastic questions. I want to switch gears and answer some folks' questions about the residential group purchasing that we talked about as the third installment of tonight's webinar. The first question was about how close the people need to live together, because I said, you know, we're going to do a group in Northern Virginia, we're going to do a group in Baltimore, but some folks were curious, like, how close together do the participants in those groups actually need to live to each other for it to be a viable purchasing group?
So it's a great question, and the answer is it depends. A lot of times the closeness of participants is more important for the participants than the installers. In other words, a lot of the reasons we focus on a congregation or a neighborhood is that's where people are, and that's what makes it convenient for them to get to a meeting. But often we will more loosely define who can participate, and it just really depends on how it's organized. But it's not critical to get the good prices for everybody to live very close together. And I think what we're planning is with the two that we've announced, we're planning fairly loosely organized in Virginia. Like we're going to focus around the congregations, but it's going to be open to anybody in Northern Virginia who's a network or part of the Whipple network. And then Baltimore will be the same, focus on Baltimore. It's the big differentials you don't want. It gets much more complicated if you cross jurisdictions. So if you have Maryland people lumped in with Virginia people, lumped in with DC people, it's possible to do it, but it's much more complicated.
We had a question about how it works in terms of residences in a single group purchase. Do they all get a single estimate, or do they get individualized estimates for the work on their home?
That's a great question. So what we do when we do the procurement, we do the RFP and we do the installer selection process, is we very, very clearly define the parameters of the bid. We define a base price and we define any add-ons that might happen, but we don't say what size it will be. And when the installer comes to your house, after they've been selected to participate, they're going to give you a specific bid for your house, which is going to be based on the base price times the size that's appropriate for your house. So if it's $3 a watt or $3 a kilowatt and 3 kilowatts fit on your house, then the price is $9,000 before incentives. So if each proposal is very unique to your house, but all of the equipment, parameters, warranties, prices, and even add-ons, like if you need an additional cost for an electrical upgrade, all that is very strictly defined in the RFP, and it's also something that as project partners, we really strictly monitor. So we actually read the proposals we get to make sure that the installers are then following with what they had committed to in the RFP.
Awesome. So I just want to call everyone's attention to the fact that that Doug Danley has posted some answers to our questions about Maryland and carports and parking lot solar in the chat window, and had some resources and suggestions there. So anyone can look in your bottom left corner to see what he's sharing with us. And I think I'm trying to think if were there any other residential questions that we wanted to finish? Oh, the other question was just about, we said very quickly that Community Power Network is organizing several neighborhood-based group purchases right now, and that in addition, Interfaith Power and Light together with Community Power Network are doing these 2 purchases in Northern Virginia and Baltimore. And if someone heard one of those go by and thought, hey, that might be where I live or something I'm interested in, what's the next step for connecting and showing interest in in a group purchase, and what is a person committing to by expressing interest?
We do have a page on the Community Power Network site that's a directory to all the different purchases, so you can kind of wade through and see which ones are going on. You will be hearing directly from Interfaith Power Light once we launch those. What we suggest is that you start with an info session if you can, but if, say, like we just finished, some of them are in their ultimate days and you want to jump on, before the end or whatever, you can just sign up online. And if you sign up online, what you are committing to is a serious intent that you understand what you're doing, you understand the prices, you're not just experimenting or whatever. But it's not a contractual obligation. When you sign up online, you give your name and your address, and it's basically a commitment that you've actually, read the materials and looked into it. And then what happens is the installer comes to your house, and then they prepare your personalized bid, and then when you get the personalized bid, you have 30 days to sign the contract. And that's when you have a formal legal commitment to move forward, is when you sign that contract.
And was the question about the level of commitment, if you're interested, I'm not sure if I caught the whole question, but I just wanted to underscore what Anya said is the commitment isn't until you've signed there's a level of commitment once you've signed the contract, but you can come to the info session and be part of the group that's putting out the proposal, but you haven't put any money down or committed to before you've gotten your personal house contract signed. Anya, I have that right. Just check me if I'm...
That's totally right. You totally got that right.
Wonderful. So we're going to actually close up the Q&A session, even though there are a number of questions we didn't get to. I want to encourage everyone that Shahar is available to answer more questions and answer more individualized questions about specific congregations or specific homeowners. And I've typed her email address into the chat window, but it's solar@gwipl.org. And Shahar would love to follow up with anyone who has a burning question that we're not going to get to tonight or just wants to talk more about some of the details. And in general, and I want to just highlight also that in response to a previous question about what are the current Community Power Network group purchases that are forming or open right now, Karen has pasted a link in the bottom left in the chat window that is a link to a list of the current groups, and that will be updated as we add new ones. I just want to end with a real appreciation to our panelists and speakers and to everyone who asked questions, and just to remind everyone, in my experience, many of us have a real strong, inspiring vision in our minds of what it would look like to have solar panels on our own congregations or have solar panels on our homes, and to know that I had done that with other members of my community, and that you need that strong vision sometimes, because this work and these projects get really wonky really fast, and much of the conversation ends up being very detailed in the way that our Q&A session was about risks and technicalities and commitments and contracts, and I just invite everyone to kind of cultivate for yourself a really strong, inspiring vision of what it would look like for your congregation or your home to be powered by the sun, that you can kind of center yourself and return to as these conversations get very technical. Because at the end of the day, we all kind of share that heart-lifting vision that's really motivating us to do all this work and venture into all these details. So I invite you to hold fast to that vision, even if not every one of your detailed questions was answered tonight, and to know that Interfaith Power and Light is certainly available to help, and that just about all of the congregations that have gone solar are happy to receive questions and inquiries from those who are working to go solar in their congregations facilities, and that the Community Power Network is an amazing resource for those pursuing residential solar on their homes. we're going to actually wrap up by just talking about some of the other things that we're doing at IPL over the next month. We have two big things coming up. The first is that we're going to take a stand against dirty energy. We're not just pro-clean energy. We have to stop some bad polluters. There is a proposed liquefied natural gas export facility at Cove Point in Maryland that would really undo all the good work we've been doing to advance clean energy in our state and be a major, major climate polluter, as well as driving hydraulic fracturing for natural gas across Maryland. And on Sunday, July 13th, we are going to march together with, we expect thousands of others, at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the institution that has the decision now about whether to let Cove Point proceed. And we'll be doing that as part of a multi-faith contingent in that rally, and we'll be gathering probably at Taft Memorial Park, which is near Union Station, to march together. We strongly encourage anyone to join us that day, to march together, and also to bring a group from your congregation if you can. For the Christian churches, it's right after church. So you could come straight there in a carpool, and for the rest of us, hopefully it's something that you can kind of come with a group and march together with those of us from all the different congregations in the region that want to speak out against clean energy, against dirty energy, and for clean energy. We are feeling like the right image for this march is David versus Goliath, because the corporation Dominion Resources from Virginia feels a lot bigger than we are, but we feel like we need to kind of faithfully speak up and stand up to this. So we will be carrying a giant papier-mâché slingshot to express that we are trying to send our hopes for clean energy in the direction of FERC, and stand up for the little guy. If you arrive later and you're looking for us, look for the big slingshot. And second, we have another exciting thing going on right now, which is that the EPA just in June issued the first ever national limits on carbon pollution from power plants, which are the single greatest source of climate pollution that our country is responsible for. So this is a very important rule that's been proposed, and there are lots of big polluters trying to fight back against this proposal. And there's an opportunity that the EPA provides for public comment during this period, a time when the public is invited to say how they feel about their proposed rule. So we have an extraordinary opportunity over the next few months until about mid-October to submit our comments to the EPA. And one of the ways you can do that through your congregation is that we have faith community postcards filled out that you can send to the EPA, and you can order a batch from us that you can collect at your congregation. We will send you a sign and a fact sheet and a stack of postcards. And if you're interested in kind of getting a kit to do EPA collection, comment collection at your congregation over the next few months, you can email Karen at program@gwipl.org to order a set. We'll also be participating to provide a strong faith voice at the DC hearing on those rules, which will be taking place on Thursday, July 30th at the EPA headquarters in downtown DC, and we'll be beginning that day with a prayer gathering. And so if anyone's particularly interested in testifying or in being part of that day, you can also contact Karen for details. And then I want to talk briefly, or I'm going to have Karen talk briefly about our next Green Sheep webinar, which is actually a different format from those we've done up until now, and I think it'll be a really, really exciting. So, Karen.
Yes, so this is going to be a special webinar on the last day of July. We really want to make sure that all of our leaders are really in this for the long haul, because climate change is going to be a big problem that's not going to go away in our lifetimes, probably. And so working on climate change and climate change itself is a huge stress in our lives. And so we want to make sure that all of you leaders have the skills that you need to be able to face that challenge with hope and with patience and with compassion. And so we're going to have our July Green Sheep webinar the person who will be presenting is Bob Doppel, who is from the Resource Innovation Group over in California, and he's done a lot of really great thinking and writing about the challenge and the opportunity that climate change presents for all of us as a society. And he's going to be leading this webinar where he'll help guide us through some mindfulness practices where we can deal with stressful moments and really present climate change as an opportunity for our community to really rise above what we're facing. So we hope you all can join us for that. And so with that, we'll just wrap up and thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a really great time. Again, Shahar will be following up with all of you if you have any questions. And until next time, we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really inspiring to me to hear about the good work that's going on in so many of our communities and to know that we're in it together. So thank you again and have a good night.